Regards, and welcome to Ryan Rambles You To Rest, the podcast where I talk at length about matters of nearly no urgent need, nor heavy impact on our daily lives, in the interest of helping you there, off to a more peaceful state. Well, dear resters, at the time of recording this particular episode of Ryan Rambles You To Rest, a sleep podcast, we are once again in the midst of summertime here in North America. We are past my start of summer milestones, the preambular entertainment year extravaganzas Eurovision and the Cannes Film Festival in France, as well as the U.S. holiday that is the opening bookend to the true summer season, Memorial Day. The summertime weather here has been so lovely that my partner and I spent the weekends prior to Memorial Day cleaning up the backyard from the many months of heavy winter rains. These rains have only been a big thing that I've really noticed these past 2 years, and they cause the backyard, which is a sand lot in the summer, to explode into lush greenery. That lush greenery which, as summertime approaches, dies off and needs to be forcibly removed. We did an amount of this forcible removal ourselves, but finally opted to call in professional support to do the bulk of the heavy lifting. Our yard, by nationwide and worldwide standards, isn't particularly large, but we, and these fellows, were still able to clear out something like 10 giant yard waste bags. If you haven't used these bags before, they're like 4-foot-high oversized paper lunch bags that stand upright so you can fill them up with all sort of awkward shaped and sized yard trimmings. And being paper bags, they're also totally compostable, which we have the service for here. With the yard all good to go, we were excited to invite friends over on Memorial Day weekend. We had them over on the Sunday of that weekend so we could still have Monday to clean up, and so that we wouldn't need to worry about staying up too late on a weeknight. And that also gives us all day Saturday to finish preparing. It's important to have some important staples lined up. I made mac salad based on a Hawaiian recipe by Sheldon Simeon, a creamy variety with eggs and potatoes, so you could say it's a trifecta salad of sorts. And I cut the mayo a little bit, just because his version is a little over the top. Then we've got Impossible Burgers, so that everyone can have a burger. And I like to think I make them pretty good. I still mix up the Impossible meat with spices and seasoning and such, and smash them. And finally, the Boar's Head hot dogs, which I can't live without when it comes to grilling. Now, also, because it's Memorial Day weekend and the front bookend of the summer, it means that I get to buy and drink watermelon beer from 21st Amendment, which is a local San Francisco brewery, which to me tastes like somebody lost a Jolly Rancher in their beer, which is not necessarily ideal, but I have tied the experience inextricably to summer in my mind and can't help but crave it when the weather turns sunny. And furthermore, it can't be overstated the pleasure of having a lively home of friends visiting and sharing their recent stories, favorite foods, and, above all, but certainly a superior bonus, bringing over better beer. In this summer episode, we'll start things off with thoughts and ruminations from some of our rambling friends and rester reflections. Then, I thought it could be of interest to briefly consider sandwiches in the roundup. Sandwiches, ideally, of a summer variety, and then round things out with a little knowledge from our friends at wikipedia.org on the declining entertainment medium DVD, which many of us are likely to encounter as our only post-grilling viewing option in the internet-free remote cabins, lodges, and Airbnbs in which we may find ourselves with friends and family throughout the summer. Before we begin, I would like to recommend that you subscribe to this show on your podcast platform of choice, or YouTube, where the comments are, and now YouTube Music, where the podcasts are. For news and announcements, follow us on Instagram at Ryan Rambles Pod. Our soundtrack is by Disparition. Now, of course, my voice is what you will generally hear during this podcast. In fact, to date, we've had no guests or guest hosts or any reason to have another voice on this podcast, perhaps besides the odd advertisement that you might encounter. However, I think it is important to bid a fair tip of the hat to you, dear listeners. In Rester Reflections, I will choose from recent comments on the YouTube channel and share them with you. Our first comment is from Moira Hill 6397. She was commenting on It's All About the Sauce, which was one of our shorts, and I haven't put any out lately, but if people like them, I can do more. Moira's comment was, I love all kinds of sauce. A different sauce for each type of meal really makes it. Moira, I'm glad we are in agreement. There are a lot of base sauces, but you can tailor any of them to the meal of the moment. And the perfectly complementary sauce to every meal really does make it. What is everyone else's favorite sauce? Let us know in the comments. Thank you, Moira. Our next comment is also from a nap, or a YouTube short, the one entitled Springtime. This is from Pinani. I love the art, Would you ever consider doing a deep dive into the history of pigeons? It's quite interesting to learn where exactly these birds you see everywhere actually came from. And do you have a place where you might take topic suggestions? Well, one place that I will take topic suggestions is right here, and you have suggested a history of pigeons. I'm certainly open to the idea. I think I have opinions about pigeons, and I would be more than happy to share them, in addition to for each of us discovering interesting new knowledge about them. So, Pinani, I appreciate your comment challenging the question of pigeons, and maybe we will soon discuss pigeons. And I also want to thank you for your compliment on the art. My partner created all of these new art panels for the shorts. So even though you might notice that our episode art has been pretty static for some time, my partner has been creating some lovely images that have made each of the shorts a little bit unique. And then once again, thank you for the topic suggestion of the history of pigeons. And if there is any ambiguity, I would offer to anyone else out there with a topic suggestion that you can leave a comment on YouTube, or you can comment on our post on Instagram when we leave a new episode. Thank you again. On episode 6, which covers Vegetables I Know, a harrowing journey for everyone who has or has not been there, is this comment from Surfin' Sun Shinecat. Ha! This is a fun channel, and good humor here too. Makes me think a little bit of Joe Pera. Well, thank you for the compliment and the comparison to Joe Pera. As I have access to my own viewership data, I know that many of you have visited from Joe Pera, and I would be somewhat remiss to not admit that Joe Pera is an inspiration on this show. I was definitely familiar with Joe Pera before this started, and my partner, who is sort of the inspiration for this podcast, was making that connection as well. And for the record, I do find Joe Pera to be an excellently affable and wonderful voice in our times. If there is a common audience between us, then quite frankly, I find it to be a comment to be associated with someone so thoughtful and also so humorous. Perhaps I can take a little time to talk about Joe Pera at another time. It has been on my mind. Thank you, Surfin' Sunshine Cat. And now one final comment from Rosetta Diabolo, commenting because I hope you can comment on my comment. This was a comment from episode 13, a classic ramble. To comment on your comment about commenting, Rosetta Diabolo, I want to say that generally speaking, commenting on commenting, especially comments that comment on the idea of commenting, are not normally up my alley. However, I appreciate your interest, and I will challenge you, Rosetta Diabolo, to prompt me again. Now I will thank everyone who has taken the time to comment on the YouTube channel, as well as everyone who has posted a review, subscribed to the channels, or liked this podcast. Your interest and support not only warm my heart, but help more resters like yourselves find their way to this channel and podcast. Now, let us continue our journey. Sandwiches can, of course, be enjoyed all year round. And although there are certainly sensational seasonal sandwiches, many of the best sandwiches conceived by artisans of the form are constantly consumable throughout our 12-month calendar. As this is a roundup, a segment it has been some time since we have engaged together, I cannot promise to stay completely on topic. In the roundup, I list lethargically and strictly from memory without notes or preparation items owing to our topic at hand. As such, I will endeavor to focus on summer sandwiches or sandwiches that are non-seasonal, but still especially pleasurable to pursue in summertime. And I will say a few thoughts from you, dear resters, in the comments, and perhaps we can revisit further sandwiches as pertain to other seasons in another roundup. Now, before we begin to round up these solstice-side sandwiches, I thought it would be beneficial for all of us to read from our friends at Merriam-Webster.com, an authority on the words we write and speak every day. Their brief entry regarding sandwich. Sandwich. Noun. A two or more slice of bread, or a split roll having a filling in between, or one slice of bread covered with food, such as an open-faced sandwich. And then second, and I think also useful, something resembling a sandwich, especially composite structural material consisting of layers, often of high-strength facings, bonded to a low-strength central core. In other words, the ice cream sandwich. Thusly now, armed with these clear definitions, we can venture out into the reaches of the roundup of Sandwiches I Know, Summer Edition. Of course, there are certain sandwiches which are debatably so, and this definition will aid to guide us. But most importantly, this gives me some guardrails to not name non-sandwiches the way my past self was challenged to name vegetables and not fruits, with concerning inaccuracy. And to that end, I will quickly list the following in order to get them out of my system and not embarrass ourselves. Corn dogs, funnel cake, fried chicken wings, fried potatoes, French style, potato salad, Caesar salad, and burritos, although a burrito is legally a sandwich in the state of Indiana. Now, with that business out of the way, let's round up some sandwiches. The Caprese is often a salad on menus, but a Caprese sandwich can be just as good. Ideally, you have a nice focaccia bread, fresh basil, fresh mozzarella, and the best tomatoes you can find. Now, tomato season happens during the summertime, and you should keep an eye out or an ear open for it, because it's all about the tomatoes in this sandwich. If you can get really good fresh tomatoes, you're in business. The juicier the tomato, the better, and the more powerful flavor, the better. Look for heirlooms or really good cherry and grape tomatoes that you might have used in the salad, and get those into the sandwich. If they're of the heirloom variety, you might want to pat them down a little bit or let the juices drain a little bit. Now, don't let go of the juices, because the final factor is a good little bit of a balsamic dressing. Or, if you want to go off script, perhaps an aioli of some kind. But you'll want to retain those tomato juices and have a good balsamic vinegar on hand. Other than that, a little salt and pepper, and you're doing pretty well. If you've got a group of people coming over, you might even be able to get a good sheet of focaccia and make very big Caprese sandwiches that you can slice up and hand out. It's also on the light side, so if you're including it with other food that you're serving or eating, or you're having a potluck, then it's not going to fill you up too much. And if you're lucky enough to have a good bakery that you can get that focaccia from, or if you're already a focaccia expert, then that's the way to go. It is fair form to follow the Caprese along the same line of thinking with the BLT. It's another light sandwich, if you keep it that way. Now, you probably wouldn't do the BLT with a focaccia, but you maybe could if you wanted to shake things up a little bit. Bread is, of course, important in all sandwiches. But for a BLT, you'll definitely want to think about the other elements of your sandwich. What kind of bacon are you using? What kind of lettuce are you using? We can maybe assume that you're using the juiciest available summer tomatoes. And maybe that's where your starting point ought to be. Or your preferred bacon if you want to do that. The bread should complement those items. And in this case, you also don't want the tomatoes to be too overpowering. And one way you might balance that is what types of lettuce you use, or greenery. You could use spinach, or I think arugula is a lovely choice to pair with the right bacon, or veggie bacon. And so your bread is your choice at that point. Even a basic BLT is enjoyable. White bread, bacon, some iceberg lettuce, maybe a little bit of mayo. But you can kind of build it and light it up however you want. In the summertime, you probably want to keep it a little light. Maybe a hearty wheat bread is too much for the winter. But all of these things, lettuce, tomato, and bacon, are pretty good in any situation. So maybe even whatever you got on hand will make you a good BLT. I've always even been a fan of the basic, but any variation is almost hard to beat. It's almost hard to find a bad BLT even. And at hot temperatures, a BLT can really hit the spot. The last time I remember ordering one was from a cafe in New Orleans. And it was exceptionally hot. It was summertime, and it was humid. And I had that BLT and a watermelon lemonade. And I was hesitant to order the watermelon lemonade because of how I feel about watermelon beer. But it was just the right moment. The temperature, the heat, the vibe of the place that I was in. The watermelon lemonade was listed as a special, and there was a person who was filling up the cups of it at a table nearby, so the batch was fresh. And so I knew I had to have one of them. And this was a icy lemonade watermelon drink, and it was all fresh. Everything about it was fresh. And that, plus the BLT sitting on the sidewalk a little bit before noon in New Orleans, well, that really hit the spot. And that's what a summertime sandwich ought to do. It ought to hit the spot in that heat, in that moment. I would love to hear if you have a preferred style of BLT. Let me know. Now, the fried chicken sandwich, the modern fried chicken sandwich, is a great summer sandwich. A juicy chicken breast, perfectly fried and breaded, usually with a slaw. And as a creamy slaw person, I think this is also a place where you can do a good vinegary slaw as well, or even a sweet one. One of my favorite fried chicken sandwiches from a restaurant had a slaw that was an apple slaw. So, even though it seems like something that fits in a certain boundary, basically like on a hamburger bun, there's room for improvisation in the fried chicken sandwich. But as I said, I would first start with a nice thick and juicy chicken breast, perfectly fried, breaded, cooked, a good sturdy bun, and a slaw. And I think also, to bring it closer to the summer sandwich, it can be spicy and maybe should be. I'm not sure if super hot chicken is an all year round thing, but I've enjoyed Nashville hot chicken in Nashville in the summer, and some of the best fried chicken I've had was hot chicken in Columbus, Ohio, and all of this at summertime. Now, I've had fried chicken sandwiches not at summertime, but that nuclear hot fried chicken sandwich with a cold drink, lemonade, beer, whatever it is that you're after, with a crispy slaw, and a lightly toasted bun. That's also part of the key. The fried chicken sandwich definitely separates itself out. And I think the fried chicken sandwich that I'm describing, and I could be totally wrong about this, is a relatively modern creation, if not a modern popular variation on the sandwich. I don't remember how long ago I had my first fried chicken and slaw sandwich, but it was maybe 10 years ago, and I've thought it was an important staple to the repertoire of sandwiches ever since. It's another hot sandwich. It's maybe closer to a burger in some people's minds, but it does work as a lunchtime sandwich or a dinner sandwich, and especially good on a hot day. Even the spicy variety, if not especially the spicy variety, on a warm summer day. And if you can't get the chicken hot, maybe there's a good hot slaw. If you're going in that vinegar direction, a jalapeno slaw might work out. And I think they're still pretty popular. I haven't tried to make my own amazing fried chicken sandwich at home, but I feel like I still see the fried chicken sandwich on a lot of menus. There are a lot of places that recognize that it's still around. Now, the one that I really like that I mentioned, though, was from a chain in San Francisco called The Bird that was fried chicken sandwich first. Like, that's what the entire premise of the place is built around, is the fried chicken sandwich, and you could get it regular or hot. And the hot was pretty incredible, and the slaw was good, and that's really why it's on this list. And it's still pretty good if you can find it anywhere else. And additionally, you may recall that I'm a fan of the Italian hoagie, and at one point I had a preponderance of Amoroso rolls in my home. And one night my partner made fried chicken sandwiches from Impossible chicken patties, and it was absolutely great, which shows how important the bread is. But a yummy aioli, a little bit of fresh veg, and that chicken sandwich, if you've got the bread that you love, you can make that fried chicken sandwich at home. Even with a store-bought patty, as would be the case with the Impossible variety. It's a very good format for chicken. And like any fried chicken, if you're thinking about a restaurant, it's a good test of how good they are at cooking their proteins. But yes, the fried chicken sandwich does strike me as an all-year-round but very, very summer-friendly sandwich option. Now, you might have access to good bread in the summertime, but let's say you don't have good access to the best lettuce, tomatoes, basil, mozzarella, bacon, all of those types of things. I think that the Italian sub sandwich, the hoagie, where I come from, another great year-round sandwich, but definitely a good one for the summertime. Perhaps a little heavy, but you get a cool salad on top of a grip of good lunch meats and cheese, and it's usually seasoned very brightly with good oil and vinegar. And with the right bread, it's maybe not too heavy, or if it's heavy, it's the right kind of heavy. Now, I often reserve making the hoagie at home to bookend the football year. Usually the first game of the season I try to bust them out, and then for the Super Bowl. But those are two events that are an excuse to eat a lot of junk food, and the summertime is full of these. So the Italian hoagie is kind of perfect whenever. Obviously, you're not going to barbecue an Italian hoagie, and it doesn't quite fit into that environment. But the Italian hoagie is good for outside of the barbecue context. It's good for a picnic. It's good for a ball game. Maybe you can sneak one into a movie theater. It would even be good on a hike if it wasn't so large. And you can always try to find creative ways of paring one down. To me, the classic is a good roll, provolone cheese, 2 or 3 meats, whether they're animal or otherwise, lettuce, tomato, onions, oregano, salt, pepper, olive oil, vinegar. And that usually makes a pretty big sandwich. And refreshing and cold. And it's a Philadelphia tradition, the hoagie, but you wouldn't say that the cheesesteak is necessarily a summer sandwich. It's a hot sandwich, and it's good in the winter. Maybe best in the winter. And I'm not trying to say it's not good in the summer, but I would lean hoagie first. And I also think it's a good segue into the camping sandwich. I like to bring a good sandwich roll as the main camping bread when we go camping, because it's so versatile. You can work it out for breakfast if you need to. It's good for hot dogs, brats, your veggie sausages, etc. And then it's also good for making the trail sandwich. And the trail sandwich, to me, maybe that's our next sandwich. The trail sandwich has to be compact enough to fit in a hiking pack. It has to be dry enough to survive for a couple of hours maybe before you eat it. But it also should be fun enough to eat. And so the trail sandwich is about starting with good ingredients, but having a good game plan. So, to me, it's definitely some deli meats. You gotta bring those along and keep them cool until it's time to make the sandwich. A couple slices of cheese, a little bit of whatever that trail protein is for you today. Unlike a hoagie, I wouldn't do 3 layers of meat. Something that has the pack of flavor that you want while you're out on a hike. One of my favorites is to use prosciutto because it's chewy, salty, carries a lot of flavor, but you can pack it in small quantities. Then, a good dry leaf. Arugula, I always like to come back to as a good example. But if you've got spinach or a spring mix that's relatively dry that you've brought with you, because you want to have your dry leaves and your sauces, and you want to put them together when it's time to eat, but keep them separated the rest of the time. So whatever dry leaf you want to get in there, and then if you're going to have anything a little bit on the wet side, I think you can maybe put in some onions. And then it's all about finishing the construction on the road. Because I'm a fan of having a little bit of hot sauce on that trail sandwich. I found at REI, not a sponsor, I found these micro-sized Yellowbird hot sauces. Yellowbird is really a really good hot sauce brand, and I think they have at least 5 or 6 varieties of their hot sauce. There's a Serrano that's really good. They make a Sriracha that's really good. But they also have these really small ones, and maybe you can get them online. But I found them in the impulse buy section at REI on a camping trip. And they're just the perfect size to fit in your backpack for hiking. Like, you just need a couple of drops. And if you can find these and then fill them later with your favorite hot sauce, they're just a good size mini squeeze bottle. So I like to have that hot sauce. And then I am a fan of putting chips in the sandwich. Chips in the sandwich are kind of a great thing. And every time I put chips in a sandwich, I ask myself, how come I don't always put chips in a sandwich? And maybe it's just important for there to be that special experience of having chips in the sandwich, because they almost seem like an indulgence. And I would say that I think just about any sandwich can take chips in the sandwich. You know, the Caprese, the BLT, the fried chicken, the Italian hoagie, you can put chips in the sandwich. You can probably predict that my chip would be Doritos. And on a camping trip, that's especially good. And I'm not really a spicy Doritos guy, but again, having extra spice on that trail sandwich is a good thing. So if somebody's brought some spicy Doritos to your camping trip, squirrel a couple of those away for your trail sandwich. You don't need many, you need 2 or 3. The trail sandwich isn't that big. It's not going to weigh you down. It's a treat on the trail in between important meals. You have breakfast, do the hike, have the sandwich on the hike, and when you get back, hopefully you're not totally starving. And you have a little bit of breathing room to get dinner ready and get the fire started for the evening time. And just to cool off and sit down and relax after your hike. Having that perfectly good trail sandwich in there is pretty important. Now, do you have a trail sandwich that you go after? Do you have a go-to for when you're hiking? Or even a go-to food? Maybe you're not a sandwich person on the trail. Maybe you're a trail mix person. Maybe you're a bar person. Let me know. I think it's fair to call it a hot weather sandwich. The Cuban sandwich is a hot weather sandwich. I think I've mostly eaten them in heat. And there's a distinct likelihood that most of the best Cuban sandwiches that you can find in the world are going to be in a place that is hot. It may not be summertime, but it may be hot. And if it's hot, a hot afternoon with some shade, a perfect Cuban sandwich is one of the best you can find. It's not too light, it's not too heavy, it has lots of bold flavors happening in it. Ham, roast pork, maybe a great pulled pork, Swiss cheese, pickles, mustard. Generally no veg on the Cuban. But there's room, I'm sure. It tends to be a grilled sandwich. And if there's any reason to have in this world the panini press, it might be to make the Cuban sandwich. All of these flavors, rich, sweet, spicy, sharp. Very little about the Cuban sandwich is understated. And it can be like a brick. In a good way. This isn't the light sandwich that you're snacking on so that you can eat the next big thing at the barbecue. This is the main event. And even though there's only those few ingredients, there's a lot of different takes on it. And it's one where the best, you know when you've had the best. Or for you, the best. And then you also know where kind of the middle of the road is. Of course, Florida is kind of the destination for the Cuban sandwich. And if you go to Florida, you will find that there are many variations, as there ought to be, of the Cuban sandwich. So that traditional Cuban construction, which is amazing, where you go in Florida, or your purveyor of Cuban sandwiches, will be likely to have something special that may not be the traditional. And you should pay attention to that. Because the Cuban sandwich is like a genre of sandwich. Indeed, many of these are. But the Cuban sandwich as a genre, you'll definitely want to think about the place you go to. What is their best version of the Cuban style sandwich? And it may not be the traditional. But the few places I've been to, including in Florida, like Key West and Miami and so forth, it is about paying attention to what that is. And maybe it is the traditional. But it's perfect for a hot day. You cannot wait to eat it. It's not a trail sandwich. It's not a road trip sandwich, although I did eat one on a road trip. That sandwich is designed like a grilled cheese to be eaten as quickly as possible when it's served. Everything about it is predicated on heat, and that's texture, and it's crunch on the bread. It's before it can get soggy, before the cheese can not be gooey anymore, before the ingredients have had time to reach an equilibrium. So the Cuban sandwich is an eat-it-there sandwich. Now, if you have a preferred variety of Cuban sandwich, or a place that you think has the best Cuban sandwich, let me know. Okay, because this is a roundup, and I'm not prepared, I'm just going to tuck in here after the Cuban sandwich and mention the Pambazo, a gigantic Mexican sandwich. Maybe it's technically a genre of torta, but it's a huge sandwich with I think like often a ground meat in it, and then like a topping to that. It might be in the realm of like a cheesesteak, except in a round bun. It reminds me of a muffaletta in like the premise of size and shareability, and I've only had it one time, and I'm really not sure what the tradition is. But since I'm listing sandwiches in this roundup, I need to acknowledge the Pambazo, and I will dutifully follow up with a explanation if I can go back and figure out exactly what that sandwich is, what part of Mexico it comes from, and if I'm even pronouncing it correctly. But if you can find one, I recommend it. I've only encountered one at a taqueria near me, and I didn't know it before. So if it's a thing where you're from, I'd be really interested to hear what you think about the Pambazo. I think it's fascinating, and not eat it all the time type of sandwich. I'd say like, tuck in and wrestle with it, and then, think about it again a month or two later, and then maybe go back. When I was in Paris, 2 summers ago, it was the hottest year on record. I don't know if it was throughout Europe or even the hottest year on record in Paris. I remember that it was the hottest year on record in London, where we stayed for part of the trip as well for a family reunion. But we went to Paris first, and I want to say that we were in the 90s of Fahrenheit. And it was oppressively hot everywhere. And the place we stayed in Paris didn't have air conditioning. But it was nice in the evening. The first weekend we were in Paris, we didn't have air conditioning. And it was summertime. We were staying near the Seine River, and at night everything was kind of lovely with all of the outdoor dining and everything. But on that trip, I had finally, for the first time, the basic Parisian sandwich. And this is, of course, another one that obviously, and I'll say because of how amazing it is, ought to be a year-round sandwich, and probably is, but I've only been to Paris in 100-degree Fahrenheit weather. And the Parisian sandwich can't be left off of a sandwich list because it's almost quintessential. It's almost like what should be the picture of a sandwich in a dictionary or on wikipedia.org. It should be, in my opinion, what everyone thinks about when they think of a sandwich. Now, it's not sliced bread, and I think most Americans, or at least when I think of a sandwich in my head, if somebody says sandwich, I think of, per our definition, something with 2 slices of bread. The Parisian sandwich on a perfect baguette with maybe not more than 4 ingredients. 4, quite frankly, is probably pushing it. You've got butter. And then from there, maybe there's a cheese. Maybe you've got butter and brie. Maybe there's a meat, but not more than 1. You don't need more than 1. A high quality individual meat, a salami, or a vegetable, also acceptable. The premise is the simplicity on perfect bread and butter. Cheese and butter, butter and meat, butter and veg, butter, bread, veg, butter, bread, meat, butter, bread, cheese. You don't need to have all of them. In fact, the sandwich shouldn't be too heavy. So you can have butter and bread without the meat, or veg, or cheese, but you need to have the butter and bread. The butter and bread are compulsory, you see. But really it comes down to the perfect size. Parisian baguette is not too big. The balance of each of those ingredients, and the ease with which you can eat it. a Parisian baguette is just the right size, like a hot dog. And it's mind-boggling how difficult it is to find that Parisian baguette outside of at least Paris, if not France. When I was there, I thought, this is so simple. It's so simple. It's just a couple of ingredients, and it's just fresh bread. And everywhere in Paris there are bakeries. It's just the common thing that there is bread every, block. And we're not talking about, by the way, freshly prepared sandwiches. Sometimes it's just stacks of them that were made earlier in the day. You just pick one up. It's a grab-and-go cuisine, and it's great as grab-and-go. And, some of these constructions would even be good as the trail sandwich. If there was a Parisian baguette place at the trailhead, now we're talking. Maybe we need to write to the National Parks Department and get this going. But yes, the perfect Parisian sandwich, which borders on being the perfect sandwich, must be on the list. The $20 sandwich is not a real famous sandwich. It's a sandwich that a friend and I came up with one weekend in college. And the reason I list it as a sandwich and even a summer sandwich is because it is about the excitement and almost free-form nature of sandwich construction and creativity. It's not something that you do when you're just preparing something for the workday, or as a quick snack, or as something to fill in. This was a sandwich that was basically a collaboration of what just seems really good to us and not taking price into consideration. For context, the $20 sandwich was created in the late 1990s, and so based on inflation, that means that it would be a roughly $794 sandwich. The reason that I thought of it, though, besides having talked to my partner in crime on the creation of the sandwich just the other day, is that it was also, in its simplicity, similar to the Parisian sandwich, but it was on the absolute opposite end of indulgence. The Parisian sandwich is a satisfying small portion of sandwich with a simple construction. This is a large preponderance of sandwich with only a handful of ingredients, more ingredients than you would have on the Parisian, but only one or two. And while we're still not sure the exact proteins involved, we know that it was on a large French roll, which had some of the excess bread scooped out of it, and it was simply olive loaf and possibly one other meat. We're not sure which it was, but if you were going to make this at home, you could sub in your own favorite secondary meat and let us know what the best version is. Then butter lettuce, the living butter lettuce that you can get at a lot of supermarkets now, and it's not crunchy. It's a substantial lettuce, and it has a texture and thickness to it. So butter lettuce, and then basically like a whole container of rindless brie, which is basically the spread that goes across the whole sandwich and is essentially like the butter and condiment. It's the condiment of the sandwich. You could perhaps find a flavored variety out there, but it's not necessary. Similar to the Parisian, it's simple. Pick good ingredients. I mean, a spreadable rindless brie isn't necessarily a good ingredient, but you can be creative and pick those meats that you want. And then this is also not a grab-and-go sandwich. This is a lazy afternoon indulgence. You picked out for yourself these special ingredients that go inside, and I would invite you to make your $20 sandwich. And part of the meaning to me of that is that it's a sandwich that is shareable. You can't eat it yourself, and you should share it with someone. And if you're making it with someone, you should both agree on what the ingredients are. And maybe you won't know what that sandwich is, but limit yourself to only a few ingredients and make this big, indulgent sandwich that you can cut up and share, and then relax poolside or in the air conditioning watching a movie. Something like that. Relax and enjoy your $20 sandwich. If you have a similar sandwich, I would like to hear about it, and I would like if anyone who is still conscious listening to this podcast to propose an ideal $20 sandwich for all of us to try. If there is any season to associate with the ice cream sandwich, then I feel like it ought to be summer. I think the ice cream sandwich as well is a good sandwich to bring up if we're going to accept in an open-minded fashion what makes something a sandwich. And a amount of ice cream in between two cookies, brownies, or pieces of cake perhaps, wafers of some variety, is a very good summer sandwich. You can eat it after you've had a sandwich for dinner. I think I've always been a fan of the ice cream sandwich, and maybe some other varieties of similar desserts. I was a fan of the now discontinued Choco Taco. And without getting into a conversation about whether a taco is a sandwich, it is ice cream sandwich like the experience of having the Choco Taco. It has a crispy chocolate shell around it. The ice cream is inside of something that you hold with your hand. If I was allowed to call it an ice cream sandwich, I would rank the Choco Taco at the top. But being more traditional about it, I was raised on those, I think what almost anybody thinks about when they think about a ice cream sandwich out of a box. The thin guys that are rectangular with a chocolate cake bread and vanilla ice cream, and they're wrapped in a white plastic, and they're really never big enough to be enough. You definitely want more than one of them. But those used to be what I thought were ice cream sandwiches when I was a kid. And I used to like to just sort of lick around the edges until I had used up a lot of the ice cream in the center, and then there was just too much of the chocolate, and I have to take care of that. Not very substantial and even high quality, those classic ice cream sandwiches. I don't even know who made them. They might be like a Good Humor product. I think you can find them just about anywhere in the United States in a supermarket. They're very classic. And then I moved to California, and in California, in Northern California especially, San Francisco area, there is what's known as the Itsit. And the Itsit is a large ice cream sandwich with 2 cookies and an ice cream in the center that has a chocolate shell on it. And it's classically like a thick cookie, dense. And they have multiple flavors available of ice cream. There's vanilla and mint and chocolate, all the classics. They've got a coffee one. They don't go too far off book, but their whole game is in the cookie. And I realize that I don't think very often, if I believe that what makes a good sandwich is in part having a really good bread, I think that I personally still need to get there on the ice cream sandwich. Because even all these years that I've been in California, I haven't fully come around on the Itsit. And most people here love it, that were raised on it. And I think most people, even who become Californians over time, also love it. I accept my place in the minority. I think I still just have this preference for that white plastic wrapped freezer sandwich over this kind of hulking, it's almost a hamburger of a ice cream sandwich. But there's no denying the quality. There's no denying that you've reached the top of the pyramid as far as pre-packaged ice cream sandwiches are concerned. If you find yourself in California or wherever Itsits are sold, you owe it to yourself to have one, and I recommend sharing it with a friend. One is too much for me. However, my partner did recently discover on one of our shopping expeditions that there is now mini Itsits that you can get in a box at the supermarket. And I'm just going to say right there, I might be more on board because they're smaller. I'm good for bite-sized amounts of ice cream these days. And these mini Itsits are kind of perfect for the Itsit experience to me, because I'm not all the way there on the complete indulgence of the massive ice cream sandwich. But I'm all the way in on the quality. So I like having the small one. The ice cream sandwich is also kind of interesting because when you think about it, or at least when I think about it, I can't think of many ice cream sandwiches that I've seen like prepared. I don't know anybody who makes homemade ice cream sandwiches. Tell me if you are someone who does. But I've never tried making an ice cream sandwich, even though I've recently gotten into making ice cream. I haven't thought about taking it to that next level, because that is next level. You know, taking the time to make the ice cream sandwich. A lot of people make cookies or bread or brownies, and some people have the time to make ice cream. But bringing those two together at home, I've never really thought about it. And I don't see it as a common thing at restaurants. Maybe some fine dining places are too snooty, but I don't think I've seen ice cream sandwiches very often on any restaurant menu. So maybe that's a challenge out there. If you work at a restaurant and are listening to Ryan Rambles You To Rest, a sleep podcast, and this podcast has not adequately rambled you to rest at this time, perhaps you can give us some insight as to why we don't see many ice cream sandwiches at restaurants. And then perhaps for all of us out here in dreamland, you can figure out if it might be possible to bring it to the restaurant that you work at. I'm into it. I think we can all agree, even if the ice cream sandwich isn't the perfect construction, that sometimes it is preferable, especially in the summertime and outdoors, to have your ice cream in a format that is friendly to being handheld. And sometimes in the summertime, you also don't want to be bogged down with having a cup and a spoon and all these extra other things. You can just take an ice cream sandwich and walk. So the ice cream sandwich, another important sandwich in the lexicon of sandwiches, and I think a good summer sandwich. There is, of course, in the subject of sandwiches, always an elephant in the room, and the amount of the elephant that pertains to one sandwich is disproportionate. But I think that it kind of spreads to two sandwiches, and I think that the time of year best associated with these sandwiches, if they are indeed sandwiches, would be summertime. These two sandwiches, of course, are the barbecue event favorites, the hamburger and the hot dog. Often it is debated whether either are a sandwich. Especially the hot dog is contentious. And I want to say that I'm open-minded. I think that there are a lot of elements about both of them that makes it useful to think of them in the family of sandwiches. They are of the genus. They both fit the definition that we read at the beginning of this segment together. And of course, rarely, if ever, that anyone was asked what kind of sandwich they felt like, did anyone say hot dog? Probably never happened. And that it probably never happened is a good enough reason to call it into question. But the hot dog is served on a roll. It's between two pieces of bread. And it has condiments. Some condiments that are often on other sandwiches, like mustard. Other protein accompaniments that are common on other sandwiches that we've even talked about, like bacon. And mayo. Mayo can be on a hot dog. And mayo is a part of some of the best sandwiches. But of course, the hot dog and the hamburger, both are ingredients in the sandwiches that they're a part of, if they're sandwiches. To me, there is no harm in welcoming them into the sandwich family. And as barbecue food, outdoor cooking food, they're the two best sandwiches. And I think maybe this doesn't qualify on the sandwich level, but the quality and preference of the ingredients that you would put into a hot dog or hamburger is going to be similar in some ways to the way you think about other sandwiches and their construction. There's still bread, there's still spread, there's still onions, peppers maybe. Like, take for example a hamburger. If you put out a hamburger bar and had a spread of all of the accoutrements, you could have a buffet line of BLT and hamburger and have mostly the same ingredients. Now, to digress from the argument for a minute, I'm kind of a cheeseburger fan. And I admit that I'm also on this great and I hope long-lasting trend of the smash burger. I feel like it came out of cooks and chefs and so forth of my generation that grew up on thin patties from fast food restaurants but wanted something better. And this sort of generation of the smash burger is a wonderful thing. Simple construction. Patty, American cheese, grilled onions, some kind of house sauce, maybe Thousand Island, maybe a slaw of that variety. And then even optional is whether you have a lettuce or tomato involved. Lightly toasted bread. There used to be a burger spot in LA that I liked to go to once a year when I was down there. And they closed, but they put lettuce and tomato on their burger. And it was a good burger because no matter what is in there, the choice of bread and the cook on the patty make a difference. A well-seasoned patty. And it can't be completely dried out by the smash process. And even if it's not a smash burger, the seasoning is important because the death of a hamburger or a cheeseburger is that even if the cook on the meat is good, it's too wet and under-seasoned, then you're not in a good place. And I will add, as somebody who doesn't cook meat really, that is true, that carries forward in working with like Impossible meat. Like you want to get that mixture right too if you're making the smash patty. And that's creating the burger. It's something you do at home. If you know a good place that you love to go to, a good burger. Burgers and hot dogs are all over boardwalks, at beach places, at amusement parks that are popular in the summertime. Show me a roller coaster and I will show you a nearby hamburger stand or hot dog stand. So whether or not these are sandwiches, I think they are summer food and aren't too far out of whack. This isn't like when I named all the fruits during the vegetable roundup. I think that we can give ourselves enough slack to say that in a conversation about summer sandwiches, we would actually be remiss not to talk about hamburgers, cheeseburgers, and hot dogs. We can't ignore them in the conversation. So even if they won't bear that sandwich classification, they have to be part of the conversation as adjunct sandwiches. Food for thought. I hope that this doesn't upset anyone, because I know that this debate about the hot dog specifically is a long-running historical debate, and honestly could take up its own episode of Ryan Rambles You To Rest, a sleep podcast. And if you want an entire episode on hot dogs, maybe we can make that happen. But suffice it to say that hamburgers and hot dogs are clutch summertime food, and I'm just going to say, for the sake of this roundup, sandwiches. If you have a favorite burger or a favorite brand of hot dog, I want to hear about it. Let me know in the comments. Well, that was certainly an interesting journey of delicious handheld treats. I'm sure I have failed to name all of the worthwhile summer sandwiches in the world. But I feel like I've named a few that are pretty good. And I'm more than happy to return to the lovely and tasty subject matter of sandwiches if you are too. And I do once again hope that you can tell me what your favorite sandwiches are in the comments, and maybe we can do another sandwich episode in the fall. Wilderness lodges, beach bungalows, and vacation rentals of almost any stripe tend to come with their own array of beneath state-of-the-art entertainment amenities. Ancient, well-worn books and board games, like Monopoly with completely random pieces, dusty foosball and ping-pong tables, decks with missing or too many cards, cup ball, and some array of home video. Although, for motion picture viewing, some of the more throwback destinations might still have VHS tapes. The super medium of the late 90s and the early 2000s that swept the world and brought millions of long-lost titles to our eyeballs at video stores across the world has become the most prevalent: DVD. As a brief recollection to our cause, in a particular ponder, we dive deeply into the details of a specific area of interest. Although this reduces the likelihood of a real roundabout ramble, as we sometimes experience elsewhere, a particular ponder does well to focus one or two things. Unlike a really random topic, or the roundup, which we just did, I do a little bit of scoping this out beforehand to ensure that I get only the dullest value for you. Now then, let us turn now to wikipedia.org to learn more about this aging and once exceptionally popular format. As a quick disclaimer, we will not explore the entirety of the article, and I encourage you to track it down yourself. I will provide the link in the description. The main reason here being that DVD has a lot of technical information to go with it, and I will prefer now to focus primarily on historical record. Introduction. The DVD, common abbreviation for digital video disc, or digital versatile disc, is a digital optical disc data storage format. It was invented and developed in 1995 and first released on November 1st, 1996 in Japan. The medium can store any kind of digital data and has been widely used to store video programs, watched using DVD players, software, and other computer files. DVDs offer significantly higher storage capacity than compact discs, or CD, while having the same dimensions. A standard single-layer DVD can store up to 4.7 gigabytes of data, a dual-layer DVD up to 8.5 gigabytes. Variants can store up to a maximum of 17.08 gigabytes, That's kind of interesting in that these numbers are not very round numbers, which makes me wonder, did the compact disc have a very set round number? And because they wanted to keep the form factor with the DVD technology, did that mean making these compromises? Because it just seems odd to me. Humans, it's a bit arbitrary because we created our numbers, but one would think that we would lean towards a 5 gigabyte single layer instead of a 4.7. Or this maximum storage of 17.08 seems all the way out. So the DVD, invented in 1995 and first released in 1996, so we're talking about almost 30 years ago. Pre-recorded DVDs are mass-produced using molding machines that physically stamp data onto the DVD. Such discs are a form of DVD-ROM because data can only be read and not written or erased. Blank recordable DVD discs, DVD -R and DVD +R, can be recorded once using a DVD recorder and then function as a DVD-ROM. Rewritable DVDs, DVD -RW, DVD +RW, and DVD-RAM can be recorded and erased many times. DVDs are used in DVD video, consumer digital video format, and less commonly in DVD audio, consumer digital audio format, as well as for authoring DVD discs written in a special AV-CHD format to hold high-definition material, often in conjunction with AV-CHD format camcorders. DVDs containing other types of information may be referred to as DVD data discs. So right off the bat with the DVD, we see that there are a multitude of types of DVD, most of them being recordable variations on the standard DVD-ROM that we're all most familiar with. I remember in the early 2000s that I did a lot of AV type work, and working on short films and documentaries and various projects that involved moving footage to just review even, or edits to review onto DVDs, because that was our most portable way of sharing material. Today we take for granted that we have cloud data systems and the internet, is really taken off. So cloud storage and shared media drives and remote desktops and all of these things we didn't used to have. So if you wanted to be able to watch your media any other place than the hard drive that you stored it on, you needed to have a portable way of doing it, and that was recordable DVDs. So, we'd buy them by the hundreds, and then we would put our raw footage on them, our latest edits on them, and perhaps various other uses that I'm forgetting about, to be honest. it seems like burning and laying off discs was happening just all the time. And I remember we'd have a label presser. You'd get stickers that you could write on or print to with a printer, and then stick them to the DVDs, and they'd cover the whole thing. And we just had volumes and volumes of recorded footage, basically. And then, of course, to bring it back around to the more familiar, it was a huge, and I'm sure we'll learn more further down here, a huge format for home video. It really, really took off. I recall sort of maybe towards the end of the video store period, right as the streaming services were taking over. I remember even that the recordable format was used by major companies as well. If I remember correctly, Warner Brothers, which is, today still one of the biggest entertainment companies, had gotten into the business of, as a side hustle, taking whatever digital media they had of all of their really old movies, and they had, thousands of them. There was a period of time where so many movies were being made in Hollywood that there's just movies you've never heard of, and they made this whole collection of their movies available on Amazon, on the Amazon store, and you could buy just about any movie directly from them. And they didn't have like a nice box art or special features or anything like that. They would just burn you a copy and send it to you. So our next relatively brief stop here is etymology. The Oxford English Dictionary comments that in 1995, rival manufacturers of the product initially named digital video disc agreed that, in order to emphasize the flexibility of the format for multimedia applications, the preferred abbreviation DVD would be understood to denote digital versatile disc. The OED, Oxford English Dictionary, also states that in 1995, the company said the official name of the format will simply be DVD. Toshiba had been using the name digital video disc, but this was switched to digital versatile disc after computer companies complained that it left out their applications. That's interesting. Now, I didn't know that. I always just thought it was digital video disc, but I can see why companies with nothing better to do would complain about their industry being left out of the name, out of the data disc, and it's a fair point. But it's also kind of funny to imagine that there are grown-ups debating with each other what the DVD means. Digital versatile disc is the explanation provided in a DVD forum primer from 2000, and the DVD forum's mission statement, which the purpose is to promote broad acceptance of DVD products on technology across entertainment and other industries. I'm not familiar with DVD forum, but there's a link here in Wikipedia, and so I would encourage you to look into it yourself, and maybe I can delve and share next time what the findings were. Because DVDs became highly popular for the distribution of movies in the 2000s, the term DVD became popularly used in English as a noun to describe specifically a full-length movie released on the format. For example, the sentence to, quote, watch a DVD describes watching a movie on DVD. So there you have it. It makes sense that the most common and most popular usage of something becomes what everybody knows it as. That happens with really everything. And that there concludes etymology. And now more on the history, and I will say that this is the history part 1, development and launch. Released in 1987, CD video used analog video encoding on optical discs matching the established standard of 120 millimeters, or 4.7 inches, in size of audio CDs. Video CD, or VCD, became one of the first formats for distributing digitally encoded films in this format in 1993. In the same year, 2 new optical storage formats were being developed. One was the Multimedia Compact Disc, MMCD, backed by Philips and Sony, developers of the CD and the CDI. And the other, the Superdensity Disc, SD, supported by Toshiba, Time Warner, Matsushita Electric, Hitachi, Mitsubishi Electric, Pioneer, Thomson, and JVC. Wow, you can see that there's a standoff happening there. By the time of the press launches for both formats in January 1995, the MMCD nomenclature had been dropped, and Philips and Sony were referring to their format as digital video disc. So there's an early version of DVD as digital video disc that wasn't the DVD format. That we know today. On May 3rd, 1995, an ad hoc industry technical group formed from 5 computer companies, IBM, Apple, Compaq, Hewlett-Packard, and Microsoft, issued a press release stating that they would only accept a single format. The group voted to boycott both formats unless the 2 camps agreed on a single, converged standard. They recruited Lou Gerstner, president of IBM, to pressure the executives of the warring factions. In one significant compromise, the MMCD and SD groups agreed to adopt proposal SD9, which specified that both layers of the dual-layered disc be read from the same side, instead of proposal SD10, which would have created a 2-sided disc that users would have to turn over, which sounds like a laser disc, which is oddly not mentioned here so far. Maybe we'll come across it, but no mention yet of laser disc. Philips Sony strongly insisted on the source code, EFM+, that Keys Schumacher-Immenick had designed for the MMCD, because it makes it possible to apply the existing CD servo technology. Its drawback was a loss from 5 to 4.6 gigabytes of capacity. Oh, okay. So there we go. It did start out as a round number after all. And then because of the need to have a certain type of source code that would work with CD technology, it had to go from 5 gigs to 4.7. Now, I would probably need a computer engineer of some capacity to explain why it took away 0.3 gigs. Philips and Sony decided that it was in their best interest to end the format war, and on September 15th, 1995, agreed to unify with companies backing the super density disc to release a single format with technologies from both. As a result, the DVD specification provided a storage capacity of 4.7 gigs for a single-layered, single-sided disc, and 8.5 gigs for a dual-layered, single-sided disc. The DVD specification ended up similar to Toshiba and Matsushita's super density disc, except for the dual-layer option. MMCD was single-sided and optionally dual-layer, whereas SD was 2 half-thickness, single-layer discs, which were pressed separately and then glued together to form a double-sided disc. Philips and Sony decided that it was in their best interest to end the format war. And I see this is where we can see, the craft of Wikipedia Frankenwriter. We have probably a quote from the same source, but adding new information. Philips and Sony decided that it was in their best interests to end the format war, and on September 15, 1995, agreed to unify with companies backing the super density disc to release a single format with the technologies of both. After other compromises between MMCD and SD, the group of computer companies won the day, and a single format was agreed upon. The computer companies also collaborated with the Optical Storage Technology Association, OSTA, on the use of their implementation of the ISO 13346 file system, known as Universal Disk Format, for use on the new DVDs. The format's details were finalized on December 8th, 1995. In November 1995, Samsung announced it would start mass-producing DVDs by September 1996. The format launched on November 1st, 1996 in Japan, mostly with music video releases. The first major releases from Warner Home Video arrived on December 20th, 1996, with 4 titles being available. The format's release in the U.S. was delayed multiple times, from August 1996 to October 1996 to November 1996, before finally settling on early 1997. Players began to be produced domestically that winter, with March 24, 1997 as the U.S. launch date of the format proper in 7 test markets: Approximately 32 titles were available on launch day, mainly from the Warner Brothers, MGM, and New Line libraries, with the notable inclusion of the 1996 film Twister. It's not clear why it's especially notable that Twister was included. Maybe it was a poster movie for the release of DVD. Or perhaps it was the most recent movie being made available. However, the launch was planned for the following day, March 25th, leading to a distribution change with retailers and studios to prevent further violations of breaking the street date. The nationwide rollout for the format happened on August 22nd, 1997. And I guess the rest is sort of history. It started small and then got bigger and bigger, and it blew up. That early 2000s period is probably the best period of time for home video because so many movies became available. They came out of the woodwork. Tiny independent companies were able to get funding to release esoteric movies. Some films that had not been ever released on home video were made available. Or in some cases, films that were only available a long time ago and long out of print in other markets made their way to the United States. One last tidbit here. In 2001, blank DVD recordable discs cost the equivalent of $27.34 in US dollars in 2022. Now, there are citation links to that, but I am a little bit skeptical because, as I said, we used to buy them in bulk, and even if they were purchased individually, I think maybe even today still you might be able to buy them at a Walgreens or a Target, but I don't think that we were paying almost $30 a disc. We were recording to them left and right, and we wouldn't be spending that much money. I'm not saying they were cheap necessarily, but if I remember correctly, they were competitively priced with doing VHS, because we had still had VHS at the time. It was VHS was still the main format and re-recordable, and well, it would be interesting to look into this more and just see how that comes out. But there you have it. I mean, there's the main launch from a movie standpoint, heavily driven by Warner Brothers, and with the inclusion of Twister, notable inclusion of Twister. That's the beginning. History Part 2. Adoption. Movie and home entertainment distributors adopted the DVD format to replace the ubiquitous VHS tape as the primary consumer video distribution format. Immediately following the formal adoption of a unified standard for DVD, 2 of the 4 leading video game console companies, Sega and the 3DO company, said they already had plans to design a gaming console with DVDs as the source medium. Sony stated at the time that they had no plans to use DVD in their gaming systems, despite being one of the developers of the DVD format, and eventually the first company to actually release a DVD console. Game consoles, such as the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and Xbox 360 used DVDs as their source medium for games and other software. Contemporary games for Windows were also distributed on DVD. Early DVDs were mastered using DLT tape, but using DVD -R, DL, or +R, DL eventually became common. TV-DVD combos combining a standard definition CRT TV or an HD flat panel TV with a DVD mechanism under the CRT or on the back of the flat panel, and VCR DVD combos were also available for purchase. I definitely had one of those. Because there was regional encoding so that you couldn't watch DVDs from other countries and other markets. You had to be able to try to find region-free DVD players, and it might have been one of the best players I ever had. It was a combo. It was a DVD VHS deck, and in addition to being able to play any region DVD, it had the capability of also recording to VHS from DVD. So it was a pretty good deal. So if you wanted to go from the compact form factor of the DVD to a exceptionally huge plastic cassette tape, then you had that option available to you. And I remember all of these other combo things, TV, DVD, TV, VCR combos. They were very convenient types of technology, but they had the exceptional downside that if one of the items failed, then you had kind of an over large piece of equipment doing only the one job, and that was kind of their ultimate downfall. For consumers, DVD soon replaced VHS as the favored choice for home movie releases. In 2001, DVD players outsold VCRs for the first time in the United States. At this time, 1 in 4 households owned a DVD player. By 2007, about 80% of Americans owned a DVD player, a figure that had surpassed VCRs and was also higher than personal computers or cable television. So that's also kind of fascinating. I mean, it takes a lot to bring a new format into being, a new physical format, which we don't really do anymore. But imagine that it takes time to go from, zero with an existing popular format. I think the same thing kind of happened with compact disc overtaking audio cassette tapes, and maybe that sort of was the harbinger of VHS, that eventually there would be a disc that could carry movies. Perhaps it was just inevitable. And it is interesting. I wonder if, we had a little bit more time before streaming platforms came in, if DVD would have been really like a stronger mainstay than it turned out to be. Obviously, it morphs into Blu-ray. We'll get some mention of that a little bit further down here, but I do think it's pretty fascinating that, basically 10 years after its release, not only had DVD surpassed VCR, but it was more common for people to have a DVD player than a computer or cable television. The 2007 is, before streaming really took over big time. And it's still, a good way into the internet. So, like 2007, you would think there were a lot more personal computers in general than there were in 1997. And you also have to figure this is also the cusp of the ubiquity of the smartphone. We have cell phones by this time. Everybody has a phone, but we don't have smartphones with touchscreens yet. Now, we will skip a few chapters here for technical insights, including DVD specifications and a closer look at recordable and rewritable DVDs, DVD drives and players, and the DVD video format. We will instead hop to the finale historical chapter, Successors and Decline. History Part 3, Successors and Decline. In 2006, two new formats called HD DVD and Blu-ray disc were released as the successor to DVD. HD DVD competed unsuccessfully with Blu-ray disc in the format war of 2006 to 2008. There is a hyperlink here to an article just about the format war of 2006-2008. And it's so funny to think about a capitalist competition as a war, a violent war. But I almost want to read that article as if it's a war history article. Maybe we can come back to that too. A dual-layer HD DVD can store up to 30 gigs, and a dual-layer Blu-ray disc can hold up to 50 gigabytes. So, right there, it's 10 times larger. And that had to be inevitable, that the need for a higher storage, eventually higher quality video output as TVs get better. When DVD started, it was still regular CRT TVs, and the resolution was below HD. It was, 460? I don't even remember now. And interlaced. We didn't even have progressive scan or progressive frame rate on video because it was such a low bit rate format. So really progressive 24 or 30 frames a second, HD, all of that was really working its way out during this time. However, unlike previous format changes, such as vinyl to compact disc, I think that is missing the cassette in the middle there, but okay. Or a couple cassettes, I guess it's vinyl to 8-track to cassette tape to compact disc. Or VHS videotape to DVD. Initially, there was no immediate indication that production of the standard DVD will gradually wind down, as at the beginning of the 2010s they still dominated, with about 75% of video sales and approximately 1 billion DVD player sales worldwide as of April 2011. In fact, experts claimed that the DVD will remain the dominant medium for at least another 5 years, as Blu-ray technology was still in its introductory phase. Write and read speeds being poor and necessary hardware being expensive and not readily available. So just as any change needing people to switch the technology was essential, and I feel like it was also essential on a lot of levels that they all kept that same CD form factor. When you think about today, we have Blu-ray discs, and it's 2024. And this form factor of the disc in that exact size goes all the way back to the 1980s. It's kind of wild that we haven't changed the form factor in all of that time, even if the disc technology gets better and better and better and better. Consumers initially were also slow to adopt Blu-ray due to the cost. By 2009, 85% of stores were selling Blu-ray discs. A high-definition television and appropriate connection cables are also required to take advantage of Blu-ray disc. Some analysts suggested that the biggest obstacle to replacing DVD was due to its installed base. A large majority of consumers were satisfied with DVDs. And then there's a picture here of a shelf of DVDs at a library. DVDs started to face competition from video-on-demand services around 2015, so almost 10 years ago. With increasing numbers of homes having high-speed internet connections, many people had the option to either rent or buy video from an online service and view it by streaming it directly from that service's servers, meaning they no longer need any form of permanent storage media for video at all. By 2017, digital streaming services had overtaken the sales of DVDs and Blu-rays for the first time. And this is really where you see that the video market, whether streaming or otherwise, is so heavily driven by what's popular. The biggest, most popular movies and TV shows drive that market. And that's sort of what's sad about this downfall. Because of high-speed internet and streaming, it became possible that the drivers, being those big titles, the companies that run the streaming services see less of a value to carrying smaller titles or adopting them. And because they own the platform, smaller independent companies are still locked out in the physical format world. So today, all the companies that were part of the DVD revolution are sort of locked into Blu-ray, and unless they can form a partnership with an online streaming company. And then at that point, the streaming company is the platform that you're at the mercy of, and whether people are subscribed to it. The beauty of the DVD was that besides the regional encoding, or even Blu-ray, besides the regional encoding, you can get a movie from any company and put it in the same player, instead of being locked out if you don't have a subscription. End rant. Until the end of the 2010s, manufacturers continued to release standard DVD titles as of 2020, and the format remained the preferred one of the release of older television programs and films. Shows that were shot and edited entirely on film, such as Star Trek the original series, could not be released in high definition without being re-scanned from the original film recordings. Shows that were made between the early 1980s and the early 2000s were generally shot on film, then transferred to videotape, and then edited natively in either NTSC or PAL, making high-definition transfers impossible, as these SD standards were baked into the final cuts of the episodes. Star Trek The Next Generation was the only such show that had a Blu-ray release, as prints were rescanned and edited from the ground up. So that's another interesting thing to see that the fundamental change in format just made it difficult, if not impossible, to make available old TV shows and movies. It's interesting that there's just a technology barrier there, that you really have to not just go through hoops, but you need to go backwards. You have to go back to the original film to be able to bring it then forward again into the Blu-ray world. By the beginning of the 2020s, sales of DVD had dropped 86% with respect to the peak of DVD sales around 2005, while on-demand sales and overall subscription streaming of TV shows and movies grew by over 1,200%. At its peak, DVD sales represented almost two-thirds of the video market in the U.S., but only 15 years later, around 2020, they fell to only 10% of the market. By 2022, there was an increased demand on high-definition media, where Ultra HD Blu-ray and regular Blu-ray formats made up for almost half of the U.S. market, while sales of physical media continued to shrink in favor of streaming services. So there you have the decline, really. You know, DVD, maybe there's a little bit of it out there still. And some of the things we skipped about DVD, including its longevity, would suggest that, you know, if you still have a DVD player and you're walking through a store and you see a DVD and you see a movie you like, it might be worth your while to pick it up still. It's not going to look amazing on your giant television anymore, but you'll still have that movie. You won't have to rent it or stream it or find the streaming service where it's available. And you'll basically own it. And own it for, 15 to 30 more years. Now, there is one last written section here that covers the longevity of DVDs. And although I do not want to bog us down in the details, I do find it fascinating how relatively short their lasting value is. The implication is that many of the first DVDs we have should be degrading substantially soon. Perhaps it's because of my age, but I feel like it is a bit too soon. The idea that the vast collections of DVDs that some people have built up over time could become unwatchable in our lifetimes is a bit sad to me. Of course, they can last long when taken care of, but I find it very interesting that to this day, vinyl records, which also require good storage and treatment, are the longest standing recording medium we have for entertainment. I mean, for much lower data sizes, such as just printed word, of course, there is metal and stone recordings that we've done. Ancient hieroglyphics are carved in stone, so technically we would say stone is the ideal medium, or metal. But we don't watch movies or listen to music on stone, on the stone format. Not yet, anyway. Although, if you have any movies or TV on stone, I'd be curious which ones. Well, that was quite a lot to think about on the subject of DVDs. If you appreciate these particular Ponder segments, I encourage you to visit wikipedia.org and make a donation. Do you still have a collection of DVDs? Have you encountered them on your travels to vacation destinations? What's your favorite movie that you've seen on DVD? Let me know. I think we'll leave it here for this episode. I do hope that you have been adequately rambled to rest and are not hearing my voice right now. However, if for some reason you are conscious at this time, I will leave you with these parting words. Trucks slip, grandiose, button, expert, X-ray, efficacious, colossal, raspy, and funny. Thank you again. I am your host, Ryan. Music has been by Disparition. And until we meet again, may your days be stress-free and your nights be restful.